In this video, I'm going to show you how to use StarCraft CREATE software in order to cut to your Siser cutter. So there's basically, there's different cut modes that you have in CREATE. You have a choice in this menu between WYSIWYG, origin point, center point, and then of course you also have print and cut. So I'm going to cover each one of these. All right. The most likely mistake you're going to make if you're using both your solo and your new Siser cutter is that you're going to forget to change the IP address, or you're going to forget to change the connection. Remember that you can only have one of them connected via USB, and then the other will need to be connected wirelessly. So keep that in mind also. And then you've got both of them working, wirelessly. They each have their own IP address, and again, you've got to check that before you send it. So you might want to make a little sticky note for yourself somewhere as a reminder. Okay, so the first one I'm going to talk about is origin point and then also center point because they're very similar. So over here I have the design set right here in the software. And it's actually quite easy, because the solo sets the origin in the bottom right corner of the material and the Siser does the bottom left. You have to do mirroring every time you set up one of these projects in all these modes, but they work a little differently, and I'll explain as we go along. But for origin points, since it's going to move everything down to where you set the origin, where you set, like over here's the little red dot, let's say that's where I've set the blade tip before I start cutting, then the only thing you have to remember with it, because this can be located anywhere as we move to the origin, is just to mirror it. So I'm going to pop out the position and size panel. So you just need to do a horizontal flip. All right, and that's all you have to do. And then when you send this to cut, now note in the create window, it's still going to look, it's going to have it flipped, but it's not going to be located at the origin until you click on origin point, and then it's going to put it at the solo's origin because it's the solo cutter. But trust me, when you send it to cut, it's going to end up and it's going to cut just like you see it right here. It will, instead of doing it the solo's origin, it's going to move it to the Siser's origin. All right, so moving on from there, let me just talk about very brief. Most people don't use center point. The difference between center point and origin point is that wherever you set the blade, let's move it, say, like right here. Let's say there's a particular location. Let's say this is a pattern paper, and you want this to be exactly the center of where the entire design is going to cut. Well, then you set your origin there, and then your design here, wherever is the exact center of this design, which would be like right here, that's what's going to align with the origin. All right, so that's to consider. And then it's going to be just exactly the same thing. Before you cut, in order to have it cut the way you had it on here, you needed to mirror the design before sending. Okay, moving on to WYSIWYG. So for WYSIWYG, in WYSIWYG mode, wherever you want things to cut relative to where they are, in the page area. So again, you're going to be setting the origin in the corner, the lower left corner, not lower right, the lower left corner. And then here I show that I'm going to put it right in the very tippity tip corner, lower left corner, so that these shapes would end up cutting exactly where I have them located relative to this corner right here. Okay, so how do I get this flip? Because I need to mirror every time before I send it, I need to mirror it. But with WYSIWYG, it's a little bit different. I can't just apply mirror to this because otherwise it's not going to be located in the right position on the page. But Paul Zinga came up with a really cool idea, which was to come over here to your shapes and then just put any two shapes on there. Just quickly draw any two shapes, and then with to page selected up here, you're going to align them to the outer edges. So this one goes to the outer left side, this one goes to the outer right side. Then you can select all of this and mirror it, and it will end up putting it in the correct locations. And then you either hide or delete these, all right? Just get rid of them. And then you're ready to do your WYSIWYG cut. And then of course, in the create window, you have to make sure that you have WYSIWYG selected, and then it will end up, and when you send it to cut, it will cut just like this. It'll put them right into these two locations. Now then, let's go over to print and cut, the last one. With a print and cut design, there's actually two different methods. I'm going to cover the one that Paul came up with first, and his is going to be really, it's the one you'd want to use especially if you want to keep your design in a particular location on your printout. So before you make any changes, you want to print the project before you do any mirroring. So I'm going to turn on the show print margins and the show reg marks, and so I would send this to print. Then after I have the printout, all set, and I have it over on my mat or whatever, now I'm ready to do the mirroring of these images, and it's working just like it did with WYSIWYG. I just grab any two shapes, okay, put them there, move them to page, get them right aligned and left aligned to the edges of the page area. Then I select all of these, the images and those alignment shapes, and mirror it. Just do a horizontal mirror, and now then it's ready to go. Now then, another method of doing this, I'm going to reverse this, is that instead, let's say that I don't care about keeping this particular area, this particular waste material, or let's say, I have it's already going to fill up the whole design anyhow. I select my design, and I need to make sure everything is grouped. So I right click and I select group. Okay. Then once I have it grouped, then I can come over to page, and then I can center it left to right on the page. And of course I could center it up and down if I wanted to. That's, depends on how many shapes you have and where they're located. But the idea is to get it centered on the page, then send it to print, put the printout on the mat, and then before you send the cut window, you need to flip it horizontally. And then you're going to be ready to go ahead and proceed with the scanning of the marks and the cutting. So I'm going to make out a checklist of all the little steps that you need to remember for each one of these, and not a bunch of details, just a reminder checklist. Okay, I need to do this, do this, do this, do this, and then I'm ready to cut. And I'll even include, check your connection method, make sure you got the right IP address or whatever. So anyway, so that's how that works. And of course, in this particular case here, these shapes here would end up being centered, in the middle of the design, wherever you had them, when you got ready to print them, that's where it's going to cut them out. So anyway, if you have any questions, please let me know. And if you run into issues, please let me know. And I hope this video has been helpful.